All right, today we're going to continue looking at Roman culture and specifically looking at the Colosseum and then a few other things thrown into things about the Colosseum. This is, of course, Drive-Through History, and I hope that you enjoy today's episode.
Rome's victory in the Punic Wars was a defining moment that set the tone for centuries of worldwide military and political dominance. The power of the Roman Senate, however, was soon replaced by the ultimate authority of one man, the Caesar. The first one, Octavian, who became Caesar Augustus, the emperor during the birth of Christ, came to power in 27 BC. He began a new era of Roman rule in which the emperor reigned supreme over an empire that controlled the known world. But what happened to the Roman Empire? After only a few centuries of emperor rule, it would be the migration and attacks of barbarians, Vandals, and Visigoths in the 5th and 6th centuries AD that would eventually spell defeat for Rome. The reason for this, some historians say, was because Rome's army was designed to defeat other armies, not mass migrations of entire peoples. Rome's decline, however, is still, for many, a complete mystery. Historians have never really agreed as to what exactly led to Rome's fall. One theory seems as good as any. The emperors, many of which were men of disturbing and perverse behavior, produced a culture that was so decadent that the eventual decline of Rome was inevitable. It was a culture that became so obsessed with violence and sexual indulgence that it was only a matter of time before it eroded from within. That leads us to a place where we see, perhaps better than anywhere else, the preoccupation that Roman culture had with violence, a structure so big that it was easily the largest amphitheater in the entire ancient world. The Roman Colosseum.
If you ever drive through Rome, you've got to come see the Colosseum. It's without a doubt among the biggest, most impressive historical sites of all time, and it's become the symbol for Rome and the Roman Empire. The Colosseum in Rome is one of the most impressive ancient ruins of all time, except for these cheesy Roman soldiers that always beg you to take their picture. Excuse me, sir, I did not see that. Hey, you will die like a dog. I will die like a dog. Yeah. Oh, would you like a piece of me, sir? All right, come on.
Of course, this centurion wannabe would pick on a guy in street clothes, but after acquiring my own gladiator outfit,
Hey, big dog!
with better abs than I could ever dream of having, he was doomed.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Yeah, good.
Oh, what was that smell? Hey, too much garlic. I can't stand a chance against garlic.
Okay, so maybe it all just happened in my head. Now back to real life and my normal abs. Now, the most obvious feature of the Colosseum is its size. Now remember today that we see less than 1/3 of the original structure. In its glory, this granddaddy of all sports arenas was a giant elongated oval that measured 616 feet long, 512 feet wide, and 164 feet, that's 15 stories high, with a footprint of between 6 and 7 acres. Seating estimates range from a low of 50,000 to a high of 70,000 spectators. and it originally included a giant retractable cover called a velarium that made this place the first indoor arena in the world.
Now let's give those numbers some perspective. Most modern arenas in the NBA or the NHL are 10 stories high, have a footprint of between 4 and 5 acres, and can seat approximately 20,000 people max. Now that means modern arenas like the Pepsi Center in Denver can fit comfortably inside the Coliseum with room to spare. To put it another way, the Coliseum can seat as many as 3 times the number of people that pack into Madison Square Garden for a Knicks game. The difference is, unlike the Knicks game, the ancient Romans could pack into the Coliseum for free.
Okay, so what is with this gargantuan stadium anyway? Who built it? How did they build it? And why? And though we've heard all the stories, what really went on here?
The original name for the Colosseum was the Flavian Amphitheater after the dynasty that built it included Vespasian that started it, Titus that dedicated it before it was completed, and Domitian who completed it after more than 10 years of construction. But the common name was simply the Colosseum, probably because it was so, well, colossal.
Another reason historians point to for why it was called the Colosseum was a 120-foot statue of Emperor Nero that stood nearby. Now, Nero did actually have an indirect part in the origin of the Colosseum. One of Nero's excesses was his extravagant, treasury-sapping golden house that he built for himself following the disastrous burning of Rome. Everyone in Rome apparently hated the palace as much as they hated Nero, so when Nero committed suicide and Emperor Vespasian filled the power void, one of his first capital projects was to tear down a huge part of the Golden House, fill in one of its artificial lakes, and begin construction on something that would benefit all of the citizens of Rome. Now keep in mind that building a modern arena on the site of a former lake simply wouldn't be done today. Too risky, too many engineering challenges, and far too expensive. But apparently the Romans had it all under control. They filled the lake basin with travertine, concrete, and stabilizing foundations joined with iron bars. Then on top of that, they constructed a massive building that would survive more than 20 centuries of earthquakes, lightning, fires, decay, and neglect. And their concept of public entertainment was so effective that we continue to copy it even today, from the stadiums of the NFL to the track and field events of the Olympics.
To give you some idea about how magnificent this structure was in its heyday, you have to imagine the structure as a complete elliptical oval, complete from top to bottom, all the way around.
The outermost wall was actually a series of 3 arcades, or stories, one on top of the other, capped by an upper structure called an attic. Each arcade had 80 arched openings in which statues of the gods and heroes of Rome were positioned, while the attic windows held polished Roman shields. Inside, a series of ramps and stairways distributed the incoming spectators to their assigned seating, which was arranged strictly by social class, sort of like corporate boxes today. And separate from the public entrances were doorways for the VIPs, like the Caesar and his groupies.
Oh, and another added feature was the intentional poor design of the upper ramps and stairs up here in the nosebleed section of the Colosseum. Now, because these ramps and stairways were so narrow and so steep, it gave the higher society Roman citizens down below the ability to get out of the Colosseum without having to rub elbows with the great unwashed masses up here. The unseen underbelly of the floor of the Colosseum is unlike anything we have in our modern arenas today.
For the first 10 years or so, the wooden floor was completely removable so that the inside could be flooded overnight with water and used to stage mock sea battles. But then they decided to build a permanent substructure that included hidden ramps, elevators, and trapdoors that could make gladiators, wild animals, and condemned criminals appear on the floor of the stadium seemingly by magic. When the floor was reassembled again, it was usually covered in sand, the main purpose of which was to soak up all the blood from the fighting.
Which brings us to what actually happened here in the Colosseum. Now, we've spoken of the Roman gladiatorial games in general, but the sheer spectacle of what really happened here is almost unimaginable. For example, during the 100-day inaugural ceremony, More than 5,000 animals and 2,000 gladiators were slaughtered. On another occasion, the emperor commemorated a military victory with games that ended in the deaths of 9,000 gladiators and 11,000 wild animals. On yet another occasion, more than 100 lions were released on the floor of the arena for a blood spectacle, and Emperor Claudius was known for filling the floor of the Colosseum with gladiators and ordering them to start killing each other as soon as possible. Now, before we consider the toll this kind of entertainment took on the populace, I should mention that more than a few experts point to the slaughters here as decimating or even completely exterminating certain animals from parts of the Roman Empire. Wild horses, bears, lions, crocodiles, rhinos, hippos, and elephants were all imported simply to die in the arena for the crowd's enjoyment. During this era, the lion disappeared from Mesopotamia, the hippo became extinct in Nubia, and the last elephants were plundered from North Africa. The crowds couldn't get enough. The human bloodshed was even more horrific. Forced battles, criminals set upon by half-starved wild animals, crucifixions, gladiators, man versus beast combats. They were all part of the magnetism of the Colosseum. Now the fighting would begin with the gladiators proclaiming to the emperor, "We who are about to die salute you." And die is exactly what most did. And when a gladiator wounded his opponent, he would look to the emperor, who ultimately determined who lived and who died, with the capricious gesture of thumbs up or thumbs down. If condemned, the wounded could be shown no mercy. But who were these gladiators? Most often they were condemned captives, slaves, and criminals who had nothing to lose and only life itself to gain. If they fought well, they could live. If not, they would die for nothing more meaningful than a moment's entertainment for the screaming crowd. Some didn't survive even their first trip into the arena, while others won match after match and eventually achieved what we might call pop star status, not to mention their freedom. Those that won were hailed by the crowd, then sent back into custody to await their next battle. Those that were killed were ritually confirmed as dead before the crowd, then dragged with hooks out of the arena through a small gate named for the Roman goddess of death into unmarked graves, graves that would be the fate of thousands over the bloody centuries. Which brings up the question, were Christians really thrown to the lions at the Roman Colosseum? Ancient historians don't exactly say, but they do tell us of countless places in the Roman Empire where Christians and Jews alike were executed as criminals for entertainment, because they were considered enemies of the state. These same historians also tell us that Roman criminals were killed by wild animals in the Colosseum, so it is very likely that many of these criminals were martyrs who died simply because they claimed to be followers of Christ. The noise, the smell, the blood, the food and drink, the spectacle of the Colosseum was like an addiction for the citizens of Rome. In fact, one historian writes of a friend who came to the games and attempted to not gaze down at the gore and violence below. His attempts would be unsuccessful because a roar from the crowd forced him to look down at what was happening. Listen to what was written.
He riveted his gaze on the scene and took in all its frightfulness, unaware of what he was doing. The thrill of seeing blood shed was an intoxication. No longer was he the man who had been dragged to the arena. He watched, he cheered, he sweated with excitement. When he left, his mind was so contaminated that he had no peace until he could go again.
That seems to be the recurring theme in everything that historians tell us about what happened here at the Colosseum. It was bloodlust, it was addictive, and ultimately it was degenerative. More than a few experts point to the Colosseum as the catalyst for everything that went wrong with the entire Roman Empire and the cancer that ate away at a culture until ultimately it was dead. So how did the brutal games of the Roman Colosseum come to an end? The answer comes centuries later, after Christianity was officially legalized and the persecution of Christians had come to an end. Historians point to the dramatic story of a Christian monk named Telemachus,
who had traveled from Asia Minor to Rome in the early 5th century AD. He somehow found himself caught up with the frenzied crowd of Colosseum spectators, but as soon as he witnessed the bloody combat of the gladiators, he jumped down onto the arena floor and literally tried to stop the fight. The bloodthirsty crowd was infuriated that someone would interrupt their entertainment and brutally stoned the monk to death. Soon after, word reached Emperor Honorius, who was himself a Christian. He issued an edict forbidding all future gladiatorial games. Telemachus stands today as a symbol of the influence one person can have when they stand up for what's right, even when it goes against the culture. The monk's story is also a tangible example of how Christianity emphasized the value and dignity of human life in a way that ran counter to the Roman culture of the day. According to Christian beliefs, there was no such thing as a meaningless person who could be abused merely for entertainment. And within only 400 years of the death of Christ, Christian faith was penetrating the highest offices of the empire. Nevertheless, the decadence of Rome continued to erode the empire from within, and a weakened military was unable to fend off the encroachment from barbarians and Vandals in the 5th and 6th centuries. And while Christianity grew, the power of the Roman Empire dwindled. In 326 AD, it was an emperor named Constantine who became a Christian himself, who moved the capital of the Roman Empire away from Rome to the east, to a city he named Constantinople. The glory of Rome was over. A new day had dawned, and the world would never be the same. Welcome to Sweating Through History.
Colosseum is one of the most impressive ancient ruins of all time. Excuse me.
You will bloody like your dog.
Excuse me, sir. How long have you been there?
You will die like a dog.
Like a rug?
You will die
Like a dog.
Yeah,
A dog. I was dying like a duck. Come on, kid.
Okay, well, a good ending there. Hopefully you learned a little bit about the Colosseum. Now we're ready to get back into our notes. So let's readjust our screen here. And we want to move on from looking at the culture of Rome and the art and architecture to now looking at the religious beliefs of Rome. Oh, okay, I see what's there. Never mind. I forgot why that's down in the corner, but now I remember. Okay, here we go. Religious beliefs of Rome. Several different philosophies that were dominant in Rome that you have heard of because we talked about it maybe briefly in our Bible doctrine class. The first is Epicureanism. You remember us talking about Epicureanism before? I'm not sure. I don't think I defined it so much for you because I knew we were going to get to it in here. But Epicureanism was, it was one of the philosophies that the Apostle Paul came across in Athens. Remember when he was in Athens? And he met with the philosophers, and we're told that some of them were Epicureans. So Epicureanism is one of the main philosophies in Rome as well, because as you remember, Rome simply adapted and adopted many of the ideas from other places, especially Greece. So that's why a lot of things we can call Greco-Roman, because it's both Greece and Rome. So what is Epicureanism? Well, Epicureanism was named after its founder, Epicurus of Samoa, and he said that true happiness comes only as man frees his mind from fear and his body from pain. All right? frees his mind from fear and his body from pain. So we've got to eliminate fear and eliminate pain. So what does that mean positively? I mean, pursue pleasure. Try to get as much pleasure out of life as you can, and avoid pain, because pain does not bring pleasure. So just remember, pursue pleasure, avoid pain. That's Epicureanism. And you do that in this life because there's no afterlife. There's no divine judgment. So pursue all the pleasure you can in this life, because there is no life to come. So grab for all the gusto you can right now. Now, I don't know if you ever listened to oldies, but there's a song that was out back in the 70s that I think illustrates this very well. It's by the Grassroots, and it's called Live for Today. Let's see if this will work. Unavailable. Of course. This is the first time that I tried to, what's that called? Implant or something, a video in a slide presentation, and of course it doesn't work. Okay, so now you're left with me singing it, which is not as entertaining. Maybe it's more entertaining. It'll be funnier than them. But the song, maybe you've heard this song. This is part of how it goes. This is the main part. Sha la 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 la, live for today. Sha la 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 la, live for today. And don't worry about tomorrow. Hey, hey, hey. Isn't that neat how if you don't have any words to rhyme, you just go hey, 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 hey. At the end. Have you ever heard that song? No, at least not sung that way. But the idea of the song is live for today. Don't worry about tomorrow. Just live for today. And that was kind of the theme of the late 60s and early 70s. Live for today. All right. So you got the idea. There's no afterlife, no divine judgment. Just live for today. Lucretius is the name of the guy who is the greatest exponent of this idea in the Roman world. Epicureanism. All right. Any questions? You got this? Oh, Epicurus said, life is good, make sure to enjoy it. You can kind of see that as a bumper sticker on a car, can't you? Some people, would you say that there are people, a lot of people in our culture, our society today, they're Epicureans? They're just looking for whatever pleasure they can get? Yeah, we see that a lot, don't we? On television and movies, maybe even people you know. All right, so that's Epicureanism. The next group of philosophers that Paul encountered on Mars Hill and was a major part of Roman philosophy, religious life, we could call it, is Stoicism. Does that sound familiar? Stoicism? You've heard that, maybe. Stoicism is the idea that everything is controlled by the fates. So emotion is useless. The fates, F-A-T-E-S. What are the fates? The fates are, in the Roman and Greek mind, kinds of gods or semi-gods, demigods that control things. We've come to accept today the idea of fate as something which was going to happen no matter what. You maybe seen in the movies, oh, it was fate that brought us together. In other words, it was something bringing us together, uncontrolled, and it just happened. Well, the Stoics believed everything was out of their control. Everything was under the control of something other than themselves. And so why get emotional? If something bad happens to you, you didn't have anything to do with bringing it about, so why get sad? And if something good happens to you, you didn't bring it about, it was just fate. So why get happy? So pretty much maintain an even keel all the time. Don't get happy, don't get sad, just accept everything and move on. So kind of, in a lot of ways, the opposite of Stoicism. I mean, of Epicureanism. The two are kind of opposite. Epicureanism, yeah, have lots of fun, enjoy life. The Stoics said, hey, don't get too happy, don't get too sad, just try to keep it even keel and accept everything as it comes. Seneca saw Stoicism as the solution to Rome's moral decline. Remember we talked before about how Rome was going downhill morally, and Caesar Augustus tried to change that by making laws to encourage the family and so on, but that didn't work. Seneca thought that Stoicism would help out because the highest good in Stoicism is the pursuit of the virtues of courage, dignity, duty, simplicity of life, and service to fellow men. So he felt if people would embrace this idea that everyone would live better lives, and that would increase the moral fabric of Roman society. They believed in the brotherhood of man. We're all brothers, and the moral responsibility of each individual to his society. So it's up to us as individuals to live good moral lives because that will benefit society. Because every man is our brother. We're all brothers. We're all in this together. So if everybody just pulls their own weight morally, then that'll help everybody. Get the picture? So by proper living, man, it should be, not many, man could bring himself into harmony with the divine law that governs the universe and directs his fate. So by living properly, morally, you're going to bring yourself into harmony with all the forces that are causing things to happen, and you're going to be not fighting against the forces, but you're going to be going along with them. And you're going to be a part of what is happening. Well, since everything is controlled by fate, there is no sense in becoming emotionally high or low in various circumstances. One must face all that happens with self-control. And another song that was popular in the 70s that comes to mind to illustrate this is maybe coming up here. Here's the idea of Stoicism. Keep calm and carry on. Okay, yeah, there's the next thing that I just read to you. Everything's controlled by fate, no sense of becoming emotionally high or low. Okay, I don't have the next song up. Probably wouldn't have worked anyway. But the next song is a song that was sung by Simon and Garfunkel. You ever heard of Simon and Garfunkel? Paul Simon? Well, they sang, had a lot of hits back in the 70s. And they had a song called I Am a Rock, I Am an Island. Talking about an individual just by themselves. I have no emotions. I don't get affected by things either way. And the ending of the song is, I am a rock, I'm an island, and a rock feels no pain, and an island never cries. Well, I don't feel pain, I don't get emotional, but it's pretty sad to live that way. But that's the Stoic. Now Seneca was accused by Nero of complicity in a plot to take over the throne. And he was ordered to commit suicide. And so he lay in a bathtub or a bath area and cut his wrists and watched his life ebb away into the water. That's how he committed suicide. The Stoics believe that man is affected not by events, but by the view he takes them. Or Epictetus said that. So a little bit different take on Stoicism from his standpoint. All right. Next we have the influence from the East. So one more area that we want to cover in the religious perspective of the Romans, but we are running out of time. So we'll have to do that tomorrow, and we will proceed then into another section looking at the world being made ready for the coming of Messiah. All this is kind of background, it's backdrop of what's going on in the Roman Empire, and we're going to look and see how did God bring all the things together, all the ideas we've been looking at, and all the events. How does He bring it all together in order to prepare the world for the coming of Jesus. That's a very important part of history. And so we'll begin looking at that tomorrow as well. Any questions? Do you understand Epicureanism and Stoicism? All right, you don't have to remember the people's names. Just the ideas is the important thing here.